Amis de la culture haïtienne, rendez-vous cassé chaque lundi soir, 8h sur Haiti TV pour l'émission Ambiance culturelle avec Carmel. Interview avec des stars, nouvelles culturelles, la vie sociale en Haïti et en diaspora, cause et santé, éducation, reportage, flashback sur la musique haïtienne et autres moments de plaisir. Dans l'émission Ambiance culturelle avec Carmel sur Haiti TV. Ambiance culturelle est programmée chaque lundi soir, 8h, mardi 2h du matin, mercredi soir 10h, samedi 5h de l'après-midi sur Haiti TV en système Roku sur Miami, Orlando et Georgia. Ambiance culturelle est une réalisation de Ropi Production Television Network.
Amis téléspectateurs, nous contents, nous saluons, nous disons bienvenue dans l'émission ça qui c'est ambiance culturelle avec Carmel sur Haiti TV. Nous contents n'importe côté vous regarder nous dans Facebook, dans channel YouTube nous, n'importe côté grand écran, petit écran, nous contents avec nous journée jeudi pour émission ça et nous disons bienvenue. Comme vous connaissez, l'émission nous a plusieurs segments. Chaque émission, nous toujours 4 segments. Et bien, journée jeudi, nous avons importance à la santé. Nous avons une collaboratrice, nous, Lorraine, qui prépare une interview exclusive avec un docteur pour nous-mêmes. Nous avons importance, nous avons priorité à l'interview. Ça, émission, nous avons 3 segments au lieu que il y a 4 segments journée jeudi. Eh bien, dans le segment culturel, là, nous avons dérapé avec qui ça nous porte pour vous. Eh bien, nous avons une jeune dame qui est Pascale Belony, qui c'est Miss Haiti. Eh bien, actuellement, là, à côté de ma parole, voilà, Pascale est en Israël pour participer dans Miss Univers 2021, côté que l'Ipral représenter nous en grand genre. Collaborateur nous Roupi, un bel reportage pour sur cause ça. Dans le segment santé, cause santé, nous avons une collaboratrice nous Lorraine qui a venu avec un invité pour nous qui pral expliquer nous pour qui ça ou même qui a un problème ou pas qu'à dormir, qui ça qui cause qu'on pas qu'à dormir. Lorraine a bien tout détail avec invité pour nous-mêmes. Et puis comme nous connaissons dans l'ambiance côté que segment ça nous porter pour nous bon petit détente pour retirer un peu stress et bien a bien harmonie qui te joué live côté que caméra nous t'es là. Nous te témoins n'a porté ambiance ça pour nous espérer la retirer un peu stress qui gagne pour semaine. Et bien amis téléspectateurs, vous capable remarquer nous gagne un bel programme pour nous, un bel show pour journée jeudi, un pile bel sujet pour le développer, pas faire loin, pas déplacer, n'a tourner tout de suite. Après vous ça.
Publicité, c'est le premier coup de guidon. Tout le business doit faire pour continuer à exister. Quitte c'est un business qui fait que l'ouvrir, quitte c'est un business qui a des pics dans le temps, quitte c'est un produit, un service ou bien un événement social, culturel, politique ou soirée dansante, confiez votre production et promotion à Ropi Production Television Network. Relais 954 729 2214 Jodia ou bien 973 517 6308 pour la promotion de vos activités. Ropi Production Television Network vient des émissions tous les jours sur différentes plateformes locales, nationales et internationales. Fait publicité pour business ou calaché.
Nous disons merci d'être toujours branché. Nous te dit nous m'a tourner tout de suite. Eh bien, moi pas te faire loin. Moi espère ou même tout pas te faire loin. Eh bien, amis téléspectateurs, dans segment nouvelle culturelle, nous avons bienvenue dans ce segment ça, côté que collaborateur nous Roupi pour venir en pile détail pour si une jeune dame qui c'est Pascale Belony, qui c'est Miss Haiti 2021. Eh bien, actuellement là en Israël, il pourra participer dans Miss Univers qui c'est un gros événement dans le monde. Eh bien, Roupi a tout détail en suivant ensemble.
En effet, amis téléspectateurs, Pascale Belony, Miss Haiti 2021, arrivée dans le pays Israël pour participer dans Miss Univers. Elle a été nommée quelques mois de cela par le comité de Miss Haiti. C'est une jeune dame âgée de 28 ans, infirmière de profession, qui dit que l'y paraît pour ce grand challenge pour représenter Haïti au niveau de Miss Univers. Ambitieuse, passionnée, Pascale Belony n'est pas à son premier concours de beauté. Originaire du Cap haïtien, elle était gagnant le titre de supranationale caribéenne de beauté, c'était en août 2021. Elle y également participé dans d'autres concours pendant ces récentes années. Moi, c'est un leader, moi, c'est une porteuse de message inspirant, c'est ça que dit Miss Haiti, très confiante. Moi, gagne expérience avec leadership qui est nécessaire pour me capable arriver dans top finaliste d'après ça que l'y croit. Ma plateforme à Miss Univers se porte sur l'éducation et la santé, a-t-elle précisé. Représenter Haïti à Miss Univers, c'est un coup mouetté dans les Jeux Olympiques, c'est ça que l'y expliqué et l'y fait connaître que la préparé pour ce grand concours depuis un pile année, c'est un rêve que l'y est poli. Je n'ai jamais cessé de rêver et de travailler sur ce concours, c'est ça que l'y expliqué récemment dans une interview. Moi pareil, c'est ça que l'y déclaré, que l'y débarqué semaine ça dans le pays Israël. Miss Haïti 2021, Pascale Belony, actuellement en Israël, pour représenter Haïti à la 70e édition de ce grand concours de beauté Miss Univers, qui a déroulé le 12 décembre 2021. Pour supporter Miss Haïti à Miss Univers, nous capables d'entrer dans le site internet missunivers.com et voter pour Miss Pascale Belony. Ici, je dois inscrire, non pas M. Roupi pour RPTV Network.
Publicité, c'est le premier coup de guidon. Tout le business doit faire pour continuer à exister. Quitte c'est un business qui fait que l'ouvrir, quitte c'est un business qui a des pics dans le temps, quitte c'est un produit, un service ou bien un événement social, culturel, politique ou soirée dansante, confiez votre production et promotion à Roupi Production Television Network. Relais 954 729 2214 Jodia ou bien 973 517 6308 pour la promotion de vos activités. Roupi Production Television Network vient des émissions tous les jours sur différentes plateformes locales, nationales et internationales. Fait publicité pour business ou calaché.
Bienvenue, amis téléspectateurs dans Cause Santé. Je nous t'ai annoncé. Jeudi à nous bail priorité à Cause Santé. Nous avons 3 segments pour vous. Eh bien, Cause Santé, collaboratrice nous, Lorraine, a venir invité pour vous qui pral parler qui ça qui fait ou même leur pas qu'à dormir, qui ça qui cause qu'on pas qu'à dormir. Eh bien, mes amis, pas parler en pile, on suit Lorraine avec invité pour plus de détails. On suit ensemble.
Bonsoir, bonsoir tout le monde et bienvenue encore dans l'autre segment Causer Santé. Comme on te promet, nous, à Soya, nous avons invité spécial parce que depuis près de 2 ans, invité ça, tu es supposé venir dans Causer Santé. Donc, il était toujours dit nous, le entré dans Floride là, la vini dans Causer Santé. Et puis, bien entendu, il kembe promesse li, et puis il vini dans Causer Santé. Donc, comme nous t'apprenons depuis 3 mois, Causer Santé, c'est un show qui passe chaque jeudi soir à partir de 10h dans RPTV, chaque lundi soir à partir de 8h dans Haiti TV et chaque samedi soir à partir de 8h dans Télé Anakauna. Donc, on a toujours fait 15 minutes. Bon, une fois par mois, nous avons un invité spécial, donc choix a duré plus que 15 minutes, donc 30 à 45 minutes. Une fois encore, merci, nous avons Dr. Jean-Louis avec nous à soir là. Avant nous aller, nous allons présenter Dr. Jean-Louis, mais il faut que nous disions que chaque projet santé à soir, non seulement nous avons pile d'informations, mais la différent pour quelle raison? Parce que choix a fait en anglais. Et puis, nous avons 2-3 mots créoles là-dedans tout. Right? So, Dr. Jean-Louis, il y a pile bagaille pour nous asseoir dans Cause Santé. Donc, les amis, nous, les familles, nous, pour nous venir garder Cause Santé, parce que nous, tout qui t'a posé une question de problème, nous gagnons, nous pas qu'à dormir ou bien sleep disorder. Donc, les moun yo vin tande parce qu'on pile information pour la guerre asseoir là dans Cause Santé. Une fois encore, bienvenue, Dr. Jean-Louis, dans Cause Santé. Without further ado, can you please let the audience know a little bit about you, please?
Lorraine, merci. This is a wonderful opportunity to be here with you, talking about such an important topic, sleep. Sleep occupies about 1/3 of our lives. Therefore, it's extremely important. My hope is that after this lovely conversation we're about to have, you would have to walk away with a renewed appreciation of the importance of sleep, and hopefully you'll do your level best to get a good night's sleep. I hope that you'll walk away not only learning about sleep for yourself, but also for the whole community, your bed partner, wife, husband, kids, neighbors, siblings, what have you. Share a good word about why it's important to have a good night's sleep. So that's the topic we want to talk about today, and hopefully you will not be disappointed.
Perfect, perfect. And I'm so happy and so proud. And it is a privilege to have you here tonight on Cause Santé. So we're going to start right away with the questions, okay? Are you okay?
Absolutely.
All right. Dr. Jean-Louis, everyone can experience problems with sleep from time to time. Someone might have a sleep disorder and not being aware of it. What are the different types of sleep disorder? Can you please elaborate more on that, just briefly?
Thank you. It is true, as an adult in America, about 30 to 40% of them experience difficulty sleeping, at least on a yearly basis. If you're thinking about adolescents, it's even worse. It's about 40 to 70% of our kids are complaining that they're not sleeping enough. So which means that America as a whole has a sleep debt. What are we talking about? What we said before is that sleep is extremely important. So if you happen to be experiencing less than 6 hours of sleep, or even more than 8 hours, those are considered to be unhealthy amounts. What the Academy of Sleep Medicine recommends is that we should all endeavor to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep on a nightly basis. Now, there are different types of sleep disorders we'll talk about. In essence, there are 80 different types of sleep disorders, but most of the time, we talk about 4 of them.
Okay.
One of them is what most of us experience. We call it insomnia. I'm sure you heard the term insomnia. En Creole or in French is insomnie, ou pas dormir bien. Yes, if you have difficulty falling asleep, it takes you more than 20 minutes to fall asleep, you have what we call sleep onset insomnia.
Okay.
If you wake up too many times at night, 4, 5, 7 times at night, then you have what we call sleep maintenance insomnia.
Okay.
If you wake up too early in the morning, you can't go back to sleep, which primarily happens when you get older. You have also what we call early awakening insomnia. These are the 3 different types of insomnia that we know of. Now, we also have another one which we call sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea. A lot of us experience this primarily if you happen to be Black, Haitians included. That is a problem when you fall asleep at night. You wake up a number of times. There are occasions where people wake up 100 times, 200 times a night. Then you can appreciate if you spend a whole night, you wake up about 100 times the next day, you're gonna have difficulty functioning during the day. You're gonna be very sleepy. Sleep apnea is a problem that we experience when you cannot breathe at night. So you might hear people say, my husband snores, or my wife snores. Sometimes people say, monsieur a dormi bien, which is not true. You are having difficulty breathing because most of the time we happen to be overweight or obese. So in the upper airway, which is where the air comes through the nose and the mouth to animate the lungs and the brain with proper oxygen, if you stop breathing, then you're gonna make effort to breathe at night. The effort we are making to breathe to keep the upper airway open is what causes the vibration of the muscles. What you are hearing, which you call snoring or ronflement, this is actually an effort to breathe. So if you're doing this about 100 times a night, the next day you just cannot function properly.
Right.
So it's a problem which has to be treated. We talked about insomnia before, which is really a significant problem, but nobody really dies because of insomnia.
Okay.
You may be miserable, you cannot function, but sleep apnea now is very important because it's directly connected to strokes, cardiovascular disease, and obesity, diabetes, hypertension, dyslipidemia, and to some degree, mental health. If you happen to be somebody who has sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea, you could be very anxious, or you could also be very depressed. There are other conditions that we can talk about, but these 2 are the ones that are most prevalent among minority communities.
Okay. Well, the American Academy of Sleep Medicine says that sleep apnea is a very serious medical condition, right? Can you tell us who is at risk of having this condition?
This is an excellent question. It is true. If you have difficulty breathing at night after a period of time, you can actually experience a heart attack or a stroke. This is why we think it's very important to have it treated if in fact you have that condition. what we are finding more and more and more, people in minoritized communities, Black, brown folks, they have a higher prevalence of sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea. In fact, it's 3 to 1, primarily among African-American or Black men. It's a condition that happens mostly among Black men, 3 to 1. Now, therefore, if you have sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea, your risk of hypertension is substantially higher. I shall explain. When we go to sleep at night, we go through several stages of sleep. Stage 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Right. Stage 1 is really light sleep. All of us will experience that. If you're having stage 1, you fall asleep, and I call your name, Lorraine, you'll be able to respond. Okay. But when you get into stage 2, most people are starting to get into deep sleep, which means if I call your name, you can't respond. But you're still not getting the type of sleep that's good for muscle restoration or muscular restoration if you're injured, for instance. Right. Your doctor might say if you get injured or of some type of injury, if you become sick, you have to sleep a little bit more. What they are saying in essence, Lorraine, is you should get what we call delta sleep or deep sleep. Delta sleep is what happens when you have stage 3 and stage 4. At that point, Lorraine, if I try to wake you up, it's almost very difficult to wake out of that. Right. And that's the type of sleep that you do not experience when you have sleep disordered breathing, because each time you're about to enter that state, the deep state of sleep, you wake out of it because you just can't breathe. As a result of that, you have what we call nocturnal hypertension. It is primarily because your blood pressure during the day may be perfectly fine, but it should go down at night. And this happens primarily during stage delta sleep or stage 3, stage 4, when you're in deep sleep. If you don't have enough of this or you don't have it at all, your blood pressure never dips at night. For those people, it's very difficult to control their blood pressure. So therefore, if you happen to be somebody who has high blood pressure and you have a difficulty controlling that with regular medication, you might talk to your doctor about this, saying, you know what, I know that we're having difficulty managing my blood pressure. Did you know that sometimes I have difficulty breathing at night? And then you might ask the doctor for a referral for a sleep study to make sure you don't have sleep apnea. And if you do, it can be treated.
Wow, that's interesting. And from my understanding, sleep apnea may cause stroke, heart disease, high blood pressure. Can you tell us about the medical risk associated with sleep apnea?
What we found, Lorraine, is that if somebody happens to be overweight or obese, that's the number one symptom or indication of sleep apnea. I remember as a little kid growing up in Haiti, when you see those men carrying these large bellies, we used to call them basha, or we used to say that those guys are doing well, they're very wealthy. That's right. Your wealth is a big belly. And in fact, overweight obesity is a number one trigger of sleep apnea. So unfortunately, when you become overweight or obese, the weight does not just sit somewhere around your belly or your waist, it also sits around your neck. That's the problem. During the day, you can actually walk around. You're not necessarily having difficulty breathing, but when you lie down in supine position on your back, that weight puts a lot of pressure on the upper airway. That's what makes it difficult for you to also breathe at night. I should also point out, for those of you who may have kids who also have difficulty breathing at night, it does happen. Kids also have sleep apnea. If kids happen to have large tonsils or the adenoids are too big, well, there are times you might consider surgery, only because if they're not getting enough oxygen at night, it may retard the brain development. So you may have kids who have difficulty learning, primarily because the brain is not developing properly. So if you have a kid who's having difficulty breathing, you really have to talk to the pediatrician about this to make sure that if they have sleep apnea, that condition has to be treated. So although it's primarily a problem among adults, kids also have problems with sleep apnea, and that's why we have to talk about this.
Okay, so how does a specialist diagnose that condition?
Excellent question. I remember many years ago, we were practicing or doing work in Brooklyn. It's very difficult for Black folks to go to a sleep lab. As Lorraine, you can imagine, Lorraine, if you go into a sleep lab in our community, we had cases where a wife might have sleep apnea, but the husband would not let her go. And you ask me why?
What is the fear?
Well, a wife of a Haitian person going to spend a night at a laboratory somewhere to be studied for sleep problem. This is regarded with high suspicion. The same thing is true also for men that say, I'm going to spend a night at a laboratory. Now, when I go to national conferences, I talk about this, people think I'm joking, but I'm very serious about this. I'm very serious about this because folks do not want to risk their partnership or their marriage because of a screening test. So what we're doing now is, instead of having folks come to the lab to be screened, we actually screen them at home. There are new technology now that make it possible to actually do a sleep apnea screening at home. So right now, there's no reason to say, well, I don't think my husband would agree, my wife would agree. Well, we could come to your home and do the screening for you.
So therefore, no excuse.
No excuses at all.
That's wonderful, because, I was thinking about it. It's mainly cultural because, our culture, we have some stigma and certain things we are married to. And of course, because of that, there are certain principles and they tend to follow, and sometimes which may not be beneficial to their health.
I agree. Most often what we tend to do is, if we have to do a test at the lab, we want to have both persons come in, the wife and the husband, or the two bed partners have to come in so that we can build some credibility. So if the wife has some concern about the husband spending the night away at some laboratory somewhere she's never been to, we invite her to come and see the lab. We invite the husband to come and see the lab. That way, we demystify the whole process so that they know if your bed partner is going to be spending the night somewhere, it's not somewhere that's regarded with great suspicion. It is a laboratory. And we do have laboratory that do that kind of work. And in fact, like I said earlier, if you don't want to come to the lab, we can come to your house and do the screening for you.
That's wonderful. I'm gonna leave sleep apnea for a little bit. I want to go back to a general questions. Many people are concerned about how much sleep they need. What's the ideal amount of sleep should someone get at night?
We have about 40 years or 50 years worth of data, whether it be laboratory experiments, clinical research, as well as population level data. All of them show that there's a U-curve association between how much sleep we get and cardiometabolic health as well as psychiatric health. I think I might have mentioned this before.
Right.
If you happen to be a short sleeper, meaning you're sleeping less than 7 hours, or a long sleeper, you're sleeping more than 8, your risk of both cardiovascular disease as well as psychiatric problems are substantially higher. And indeed, your risk of mortality are substantially higher. So this is why we are talking about this for. This is very important. I should point out also that although we know for a fact if you're sleeping less than 6 hours, your risks are substantially higher, we have to say there are some naturally born short sleepers, meaning there are people who spend their whole life sleeping 5 or 6 hours. They are just fine. That's just the way God created them, so to speak. But if you happen to be a short sleeper and you realize you've fallen asleep at the wheel, you had a near miss in terms of car accidents, you've fallen asleep while at work, or you have no energy level because of sleep problems, you are not getting enough sleep. So we highly recommend, especially if you happen to have difficulty breathing, you speak to a clinician about this to make sure that if in fact you have a problem, we can actually help you get a good night's sleep. That's why this is so critical. And unfortunately, there are so few specialists in our communities that know about sleep disordered breathing or sleep apnea. In fact, those who know about this, I probably know all of them, if I may say. So there is a lack of professionals who understand what sleep apnea is, how to diagnose it, and how to treat this. Here's the good news. We are now in South Florida at the University of Miami. If in fact you need to refer your patients for sleep assessment, again, we could do it at the lab. We could also do it at their home.
Oh, well, perfect, perfect. And Dr. Jean-Louis, I have heard that people sleep less as they get older. Is that a true statement? We
published a paper about 2 years ago where we talked about a bunch of sleep myths. Maybe we'll let the audience know about this.
Please.
It could be a myth, and I'll tell you why it might be a myth. If you happen to have your grandpa who's 75 years of age, doesn't have any significant medical comorbidities or medical problems, grandpa's gonna sleep just fine. In fact, there are occasions where grandpa might sleep more than a younger person because grandpa now have the luxury to spend more time in bed. But most of the time, we have all types of medical maladies, such as we talked about before, high blood pressure, diabetes, and also because of pain, knee pain, back pain. All of those compromise our ability to get a good night's sleep at night. So it's not that as we get older, we sleep less. As we get older, we tend to become sicker. And because of that, we spend more time in bed, but we're not necessarily sleeping more, unfortunately. There's also another problem, Lowen, I should point out. As we get older, there is a particular organ in our brain called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. That little organ controls how much melatonin we are releasing during the night. You may have heard this before. If you can't sleep, you take some melatonin at night and then it helps you sleep. In essence, what this is doing is it's replacing the endogenous melatonin we produce naturally. But unfortunately, that's how we are created. As we get older, we produce a little less. That's where if you take exogenous melatonin, it makes it easier for you to fall asleep and to stay asleep. So the fact that people say as you get older, you sleep less is almost a myth if you happen to be somebody who doesn't have any medical or significant medical illnesses. If you happen to be free of pain or free of maladies that compromise your ability to sleep, you get more sleep.
Wow. Thank you so much for the clarifications, because this is one of the among 20 other questions that we received yesterday when I announced that we're gonna have a show on sleep. It was one of them. Thanks so much for the clarification. Another thing, going back to sleep apnea. Okay, what are some of the ways sleep apnea can be treated? How do we treat that?
I used to be a director of a sleep clinic in Brooklyn some years ago. We would discuss two options.
Okay.
One is, since you cannot breathe at night, we use a device we call positive airway pressure. Think of it this way. If you imagine a garden hose, you're trying to water your flowers, and one of your kids steps on it. Notice that the flow reduces substantially, sometimes completely, sometimes partially. Sure. So the same thing happens with our ability to breathe at night if we have sleep apnea. It's not enough air going through the upper airway, and that's why we're having difficulty breathing. So this machine, which you call positive airway pressure PAP device, you put it on the person's nose and mouth that keeps the upper airway open so that oxygen can flow naturally. Just like when the kid lifts up his feet, now the water can flow very naturally. That's what the CPAP machine does. It makes it easier for breathe at night, therefore you can sleep better. Now, although this works beautifully, we do not want somebody to wear a CPAP machine for the rest of their lives. If you remember, we talked about before, about 60 to 75% of people have overweight or obesity, in fact, have sleep apnea. So in essence, the real treatment is you have to lose weight. But we know it's very difficult. So you ask me, how do you lose weight? A lot of people say you have to go exercise. Well, that does help. But very few people, as you know, would begin an exercise regimen and continue on this for months it used to come. So what we ask folks to do is to increase the level of physical activity.
Okay.
Hear me out, folks. If you happen to be a patient going to your doctor's office, do you really have to park right in front of the building? Can you not park maybe 2 blocks away? Well, guess what you have just done? You just exercise. Okay. If the office is on the 2nd floor, do you have to take the elevator? If you have the ability to walk upstairs, why don't you just walk upstairs?
Walk upstairs.
That's all the activity you need. So although CPAP machine works beautifully, but ultimately the best treatment is to lose weight.
Wow. So, comme audience causée santé, comme nous tout attendons là, donc m'a rentré avec un petit créole là. Donc, comme nous attendons, nous intervention que nous sommes capables de faire qui peut aider nous vraiment avec problème ça, c'est tourner back encore dans wellness là et c'est perdre du poids. Comme moi t'ai toujours dit, nous améliorer dans ça n'a manger, bon exercice là vraiment important. Docteur Jean-Louis dit nous ça là, nous pas obligé monter un treadmill pour 2-3 heures de temps. Si nous prenons la market là, essayer de parquer plus loin. Si nous avons monté non, pas prendre élévateur pour aller dans le 2e floor, mes amis, pour escalier, ça capable aider nous, n'est-ce pas, docteur Jean-Louis?
Absolument, c'est ça.
OK. Docteur Jean-Louis, okay, we have one question for you now, which is awareness. And what it is exactly is how you can provide that education to our audience. How can we improve our sleep health?
Well,
What can we do to
it
improve our
begins
sleep?
with a show like this. We're trying to share with folks that sleep is extremely important and you have to take care of it.
Okay.
What can we do? Well, if you happen to be someone who has adequate time in bed, but you feel you're not getting enough sleep, there are a number of things you have to think about. For instance, you have to have a regular routine to go to bed and to get out of bed, meaning same time you go to bed, same time you wake out of bed. If it's your 10 o'clock bedtime, you stick to it. Don't do 10 o'clock tonight and then tomorrow night you do 11, then you go 9 o'clock. No, remember I talked about the supercast body nucleus, the time machine, so to speak, that regulates all of the bodily hormones, such as melatonin or body temperature. This little guy in our brain is regulated by having a regular light-dark cycle, regular routine. That's really important. Secondly, we happen to be living in a culture where people tend to eat heavy meals at night. So we recommend very highly for your last meal should not be within 4 hours of your bedtime. So if you're going to be going to bed at 10 o'clock at night, your last meal should be about 6 o'clock. Can you have a little piece of crackers or coffee or a cup of tea? Mm-hmm. Yes, you can. Next, we talk about coffee. I happen to be somebody who drinks coffee every morning. Mm-hmm. But after 3 p.m., I would not have a cup of coffee. Why? Because coffee is a stimulant. So anything that stimulates the brain at night, such as a cup of coffee, heavy consumption of alcohol, or spicy foods, all of those would disturb your sleep. Now, I know what a lot of people do is when they can't sleep at night, they think that by having a drink, it helps them sleep. It only helps you fall asleep. Mm-hmm. And it wakes you up later on because of increased body temperature. So consumption of alcohol should be limited to about 4 hours before you go to bed. And certainly not large quantity, a glass of wine certainly would be fine. We also think about the bedroom environment. Mm-hmm. Even if you do not have sleep apnea, if you have insomnia, there are times you might have what we call conditioned insomnia, which means the bedroom environment has been conditioned such that you would not be able to fall asleep. What are we talking about? Yeah. There are people that balance the checkbook in the bedroom environment. You know what happens? That causes a lot of arousal, causes a lot of anxiety if you cannot balance the checkbook. Okay. Some people have a TV in their bedroom set, mm-hmm. which is not recommended. Why? We tend to watch TV before we go to bed. The brain needs to be soothed at night, not stimulated. Uh-huh. You want to stimulate the brain in the morning, not at night. Okay. If you happen to have anything in your bedroom that reminds you of something bad that happened in your life, the death of a parent, the death of a loved one, you may want to remove this from the bedroom environment. In other words, the bedroom should be reserved for two things: sexual activity and sleep, nothing else.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for elaborating on that, Dr. Jean-Louis. Can you tell us about your work, the work that you and your team are doing in South Florida to help people get a better night's sleep?
Wonderful. So what we are doing, in essence, is having conversation with folks like you. You're doing a wonderful job in the community, making sure that people are improving their life, improving their health, improving their well-being. Sleep is only a small aspect of the work you are doing, Lorraine, because sleep really, as we talked about before, is connected to everything. So our job primarily is to go to different community venues to talk about sleep health. What we are doing in particular is we are looking at different types of environmental factors that make it more difficult for Black folks and brown folks to get a good night's sleep. What are we talking about? We're looking at things such as noise level, temperature fluctuation in your bedroom. Oh. We're looking at light levels. We're looking at sound quality. And we're also looking at how much green space you may have exposure to. So when you hear people say you should go to the park and Saturday and Sunday, what they're saying to you is green space is good for both mental health and physical health. Mm-hmm. So we look at all those environmental factors, I forgot to mention air quality, that make it more difficult for folks in brown and Black communities to experience good night's sleep. And based upon that, we hope to be able to develop models that can be used to develop policies to improve the environmental conditions in our communities. So in a nutshell, it's really about learning about environmental factors, but also sharing the good news about what people can do to improve their sleep health.
Wow. So if someone is interested Can you hear me? If someone is interested in learning more about their sleep condition, how can they get involved and how can they reach out to you?
We do have a website at the University of Miami. If you key in anything, anytime you key in sleep, SLEEP, you'll be able to find us. We also have an email address, tscs@miami.edu. TSCS is Transitional Sleep and Circadian Sciences, as Lois mentioned earlier. TSCS@miami.edu. If you have any question about sleep, if you want to get involved in some of our research program, we'd be very happy to speak with you and enroll you to make sure that you learn about your own sleep patterns so that we can give you certain tips about what you can do individually to improve your sleep health.
Dr. Jean-Louis, l'heure a passé parce que nous connaissons, nous te dit, nous prend 30 minutes. Même connaît, c'est première fois venir dans show, mais c'est pas dernière fois. Nous rencontré encore parce que a fait problème de pas dormir ça ou bien disorder qui gagne dans sleep disorder ça, nous connaissons que nous avons besoin plus qu'un show pour nous parler de ça. Donc, nous sommes toujours capables d'inviter encore, si vous voulez venir dans Cause Santé pour nous discuter plus. Avant de nous aller plus loin, dans la recherche que nous avons fait, Dr. Jean-Louis, ça m'a remarqué que sleep is very important. I was reading somewhere, it says that there are more than 100 million Americans of all ages who are not getting adequate amount of sleep. So not getting enough sleep can have untold consequences on every aspect of someone's life. For instance, school, work performance, interpersonal relationship, health, safety, and all of that. Overall, not getting enough quality of sleep can hurt a quality of life. Avant de aller plus loin, comment ka boucler ça pour nous? What can you incorporate into that aspect of health, sleep, and our life?
I have to tell you, we have had situations where couples were having major difficulty in their marriage because of lack of sleep.
Wow.
Examples would be the husband was snoring and the wife says, "You can't sleep next to me anymore because I can't take that snoring anymore."
Wow.
This is very serious stuff.
Mm-hmm.
These are conditions that can be treated, but because of lack of information, well, we're not seeking help. That's what we are doing here, is to share with you the good news that we can help you get a good night's sleep. Help is on the way. You just have to reach out to us or reach out to Lowen to some degree. We will be able to share the good news and different types of tips on how to sleep better. And if in fact it has to be treated with medical apparatus, we can actually do that. Yes, sleep is critically important. And hopefully tonight you all get a good night's sleep. And if you don't, please call me. I'll be very happy to help. Lowen, d'accord avec entièrement. Si nous ne dormons pas bien, santé nous en général supposée affectée. Et nous ne parlons pas ça.
Nous parlons ça. Donc, une fois encore, Dr. Jean-Louis, nous vraiment contents d'être que vous venez dans Cause Santé à Soya et vous vraiment discuter en pile aspect là dans fait problème dormir ça. Donc, avant d'aller, est-ce que vous capable ban nous un email ou ban nous email déjà côté que nous capable contacter ou du moins qui projet vous gain là pour Florida parce que nous connaissons à peine entrer dans Florida là. Nous commençons à parler de longtemps, Dr. Jean-Louis, depuis avant la pandémie, là, vous êtes supposé venir dans Cause de Santé, vous avez dit que l'on vient de Florida, nous sommes bien contents que vous venez là. Mais projet que vous avez fait, est-ce que comme si nous sommes capables d'aider dans ce que vous avez fait, qui genre de support qu'on a besoin ou du moins, qui ça nous capable de faire pour nous aider?
Entièrement. Bien que nous dit que projet que nous gagnons, c'est pour Noirs en général, mais il faut dire que depuis le temps qu'on a fait recherche ça fait près de 20 ans, nous n'avons pas assez haïtiens qui participent là-dedans. Ça veut dire que, genre de problème qu'on a parlé là, nous connaissons qu'il existait, mais cependant, data ou données sur haïtiens, nous allons gagner. Donc, nous avons espéré que beaucoup plus haïtiens participent dans le projet qu'on a fait, pour que les gens font recommandation en termes de ça pour faire pour traiter, pour qu'il y ait un bon set de données qui est appliqué à la communauté haïtienne.
D'accord. Donc, on est bien content que vous élaborez ça sur ça pour nous là. Donc, nous keep in touch. Et une fois encore, merci d'être participé dans Cause Santé à Soya. Donc, pour tout le monde qui a regardé nous là, merci d'être nous brancher dans Cause Santé et pas oublier Cause Santé là chaque jeudi soir sur RPTV à partir de 10h, Haiti TV, lundi soir, 8h, et Télé Anacaona, samedi soir, à partir de 8h. Une fois encore, merci. C'était Lorraine avec Dr. Jean-Louis, dans Cause Santé. À la prochaine.
Bienvenue dans l'ambiance, amis téléspectateurs. Comme je toujours dit, nous portons une petite ambiance pour nous connaissons aujourd'hui between stress dans le pays ici, corona dans le monde entier, stress Haïti, kidnapping, tout ça qui est dans le monde le monde bouleversé par rien qui en paix. Eh bien, amis téléspectateurs, nous-mêmes dans RPTV, nous voulons boire un petit stress relief. Si nous sommes capables de le comme ça, un petit break avec stress là, nous portons ambiance pour côté que nous gagnons. Bel programme, côté caméra, nous t'es là, nous t'es filmé, belle ambiance qui t'est passée, ou gen avec caméra danser, on l'est non ambiance, ça pas possible. Eh bien, amis téléspectateurs, jeudi à nous porter harmonique pour, qui t'est joué quelque temps de cela. Caméra nous t'es là, nous t'es témoin, et une belle fête. Eh bien, mes amis, on font danser, on oublie problème yo, on danse ensemble, kounya là avec harmonique, ambiance. nous dévoter pour vous, amis téléspectateurs. Émission nous a fini pour journée aujourd'hui. Nous espérons terrain, mais ça nous dévoter pour émission antérieure pour nous attendre. Eh bien, nous cassons rendez-vous lundi prochain pour une plus belle émission Ambiance culturelle avec Carmel sur Haiti TV. Carmel de Ronstré, à lundi prochain. Ciao, ciao.
Amis de la culture haïtienne, rendez-vous cassé chaque lundi soir, 8h sur Haiti TV pour l'émission Ambiance culturelle avec Carmel. Interview avec des stars, nouvelles culturelles, la vie sociale en Haïti et en diaspora, causer santé, éducation, reportage, flashback sur la musique haïtienne et autres moments de plaisir. Dans l'émission Ambiance culturelle avec Carmel sur Haiti TV. Ambiance culturelle est programmée chaque lundi soir 8h, mardi 2h du matin, mercredi soir 10h, samedi 5h de l'après-midi sur Haiti TV en système Roku sur Miami, Orlando et Georgia. Ambiance culturelle est une réalisation de Ropi Production Television Network.